What's up, everybody? I'm back with another movie review, and this one is of Full Metal Jacket, a war slash drama movie that was released in 1987. Well, like the last couple movie reviews I've done, Videocracy and Let's Go to Prison, this one is more not so humor oriented. Instead, it's about people getting drafted into the Vietnam War and their experience, starting with basic training slash boot camp and all that stuff, going all the way up to actually being in combat. And it wasn't always a great. Oh, so where do I even? Okay, so where do I even begin with this movie? Because I think there's really two sides to this movie. There's two parts to this movie, kind of thrown into one. The first part, with them being in the boot camp on the island, as they call it, and training and stuff like that, and then them actually being in combat. Seems like two different things there. And, they tie together, but felt kind of unnecessary. This movie had a plot. This movie really lacked a real plot, I think. The characters were just soldiers. I had to ask, I watched this at Dan Snake's house. I had to ask him, who's the main character? And this was a good 30-40 minutes into the movie when we should have already known who the main character was. We don't even know who. I couldn't even tell who it was. I was wrong. I took a guess and I was wrong. So, about who it was. And you have to really analyze it. You have to really watch it. You have to really dive deep into it to figure out who the main character is in this movie. And I just don't think, I think it's too complicated, too hard to figure out for it to really be called a good, cohesive movie. And really the plot's just them, the process of going through Vietnam and the war and stuff like that. It could have been a documentary and I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And is that really what you want out of this movie? Now, don't get me wrong. I think it did a very good job of depicting what it was like, the psychological, the physical horrors of not just getting in the war, but getting to the war, training and going through that. Especially somebody who just got drafted into the war, didn't actually volunteer to go in. He got drafted, forced to go in, and how they weren't built for it, and how that really changes the people as the camp goes along. And then, just the horrors, the struggles of that, all that kind of stuff, carrying over also into the war. I think it did an amazing job portraying that, but I feel like it was more done in a more documentary style than more so of a movie, like a war movie. Like I've seen Forrest Gump, which yes, I'm calling a war movie, and Saving Private Ryan, which is definitely a war movie. Both of those I'll have to watch again to do full reviews of, but I know I've watched them both in school, actually. But those have actual story. They have actual character development along with being in the war and it's still being very well, Forrest Gump's all sorts of different things, but I mean, Saving Private Ryan we can more compare it to being in the war and stuff like that. And this movie it did more of showcasing than storytelling, if you know what I mean. There was, and then there was also, I mean, because there were so many periods of dead time where they're just running around, and when they're training, or when then the sergeant's yelling at them, and when they're actually in Vietnam, there's many just dead points and them just walking along the grass or walking along the street, or them just sitting there waiting for combat. And especially in the training portion, with them just doing the cycles back and forth with the gun and stuff like that, like where to put it, how to hold it, that kind of thing. Like they did that marching techniques, all that sort of stuff. There was just a lot of that, and there was a lot of dead time that I think really they could have either filled in with more character development, which I think this movie desperately needed, or some action scenes. Maybe don't show as much on the island training. I get why they did that, and I think they played its part well, but I think they could have gone a little bit more with Vietnam itself. And again, I think it would have helped a little bit to have a more established main character. and we just don't get that, which I think really lacks in being able to follow this movie. I think this is definitely a movie, if you want to get a full opinion on it, watch it a couple times or really deep dive into it, like really deep. Because and then you have to like think back and connect the dots, like, oh yeah, this guy's this and stuff. Like maybe do a little prior research. Like you shouldn't have to do prior research though to really understand who's who in the movie, like what role they're supposed to have. So you know that kind of sucked. But now there was pretty shocking moments as well. You get to know some of these characters. Like there's one guy in the training, the bigger guy, and he ends up like shooting the sergeant, killing the sergeant, and then shooting himself in the process. And I think he was the main. That's who I thought was the main character because they focused on him so much in that portion of the movie. And then it turns out he wasn't the main character, which I thought was weird. Like, shouldn't the guy with the most screen time be the one to get the main character role? That's what I thought. But he ends up shooting himself in the face, so he's not really actually the main character. He's more just a guy. Now I figured out when his ending part happens, you do realize, oh, he was there to depict the psychological damage of being in training for this war and everything like that. So then how that could have the effect on just some random civilian who turns 18 and then immediately has to go off to war, can't even go to college or anything like that. So I thought that was a really good depiction of that. However, you know, again, could have just been a documentary. I think a lot of this movie could have just been a documentary or been cut out and edited in for story purposes. Like, you know, most movies these days are fabricated. Like, real life things are just fabricated for Hollywood-esque things. You know, sports movies kind of fit in that category, with always having the very climactic ending and then stuff like that. War movies have it too a little bit. There's a lot of like action movies and stuff like that. This movie I thought could have done better. And, you know, maybe this is a little too realistic. Because when you have like 4 or 5 minute dead periods of them not talking, there's no sound at all, walking along, like that's real depiction of what happened in Vietnam. But is that really going to catch the eyes of an audience? You know, are they thinking real documentative perspective, or are they thinking capitalist perspective? Because if you want to have a job, you got to think of capitalist perspective. But, so that's why it makes it really hard to rate this movie, honestly. It makes it really hard to rate this movie what to put it. I think I'm going to have to give it a 7, though. Because its depiction was good. But it being a real cohesive movie, it really lacks in. So I maybe give 6 or 7 again, just like Let's Go to Prison. But if you're into war movies, this is definitely for you. I think you will definitely very much enjoy this movie. If you are not a war movie fan, I would recommend staying away from this movie. Maybe still give it a watch. I would still recommend giving it a watch, but if you're not into war movies, don't expect to really like it. But maybe you'll be blown away and surprised. There's always hope, always a chance. But that's going to do it for this movie review. Stay tuned for much more amazing content coming here to you. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Bye.